What? You can go home. You can watch it. I got the, actually, I love that I can talk to you about this. Lisa will be here too. Lisa's here. Can you see the screen okay? Oh, gosh. I'm talking here. This is where I'm talking. This is defined itself. What? Me? I'm not nervous. Me? No. Thirsty, but not nervous. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Stec. I'm the president of Padua Franciscan High School, and I'm happy to be with you this evening to talk about a pretty serious situation and topic in our world today, which is adolescent mental health, specifically depression. Why don't we begin with prayer? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good loving God, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for the gift of coming together this evening, whether here in person or virtually. We ask that you continue to bless those children that are in our lives, those students and young people who are trying to figure out their plan, your plan for them. We ask you to continue to bless us as caregivers of your children. Help us to continue to find the right message, the right hope, the right way of continuing to strengthen. How do we help them get through some of these difficult things that even are difficult for us? In a very special way, we know that you are with us. Your love, your faith, your hope are in our hearts as we continue to move forward into this new and unprecedented world. We ask you for your continued blessing tonight for all those traveling. In a particular way, we ask you to bless all of our families with your love and care. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So once again, good evening. The talk that I was asked to do was really to talk about mental health and how to work with adolescents specifically as you parents are trying to navigate some of the waters of what's happening in our world. And I use the picture of a puzzle because I think that's really what we're dealing with in a very real world. There's so many pieces of what it means to be an adolescent today and all of the difficulties that are coming along with that, as I said. So, why am I here? First and foremost, I do think these are serious times. I think they're different, and it's certainly a ministry that's been very, very important to me in my life. I've been a part of schools for 30 years. I've been a campus minister, I'm a clinical counselor, and I'm also a high school administrator. So I have a combination of faith, psychology, and ministry that I think really does come together in a great way to try to help give some light to some of the confusing things that we're dealing with. I also have 735 students under my care. And those of you who know me, I take that very, very seriously. I have wonderful young people in my life, members of this community, Rebecca and Luke and Sarah and Andrew, that I love very much, along with so many other of my nephews and nieces, that I find that this is very important. And then certainly Father Bob asked me. So as his brother, it's hard for me to say no to him as well. So that's why I'm here. I don't know why you're here either virtually or in person. I don't know if you're dealing with family members who are struggling, if you're scared or nervous or worried. Those are real feelings when we don't know how to respond to what we see happening. Maybe you're looking for some advice, or you're at your wit's end. You've tried everything, and you have some questions that maybe you want some answers to. So my hope is that this evening what we'll do is explore the current situation, maybe give you some insight into what's happening, get some information, provide some practical things to do, provide you with a decision model to see if really you need something more than what you're already providing. Answer some questions. If you have paper and pens, maybe you can write down some questions as we go through this. But I also want to bring you hope. Right? That's one of the things about our faith that is a real game changer in all of this, is that we are taught and given hope. And I don't know if you were able to see the Mass Worship Aid this weekend. Father Bob always gives us this menu for what we should do, this recipe of how to look at things. But I will tell you, as I went through this Mass Aid, it was filled with this understanding that God wants our kids to be happy and healthy and holy, that he wants us to be happy, healthy, and holy, to shout with gladness, to dance for joy. He has turned your sorrow to joy and filled your soul with song. Do not be sad and do not weep, comes from prophet Nehemiah. Right? The second reading continues to talk about how we are many parts but all one body, that we're here to care for each other. In the gospel this Sunday, he unrolled the scroll and found the passage where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring glad tidings to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to captives, to recover sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free." Our hope is found in Scripture. Our hope is found in faith, and I will continue to talk about that this evening as we go through all of this. As I said, these are unprecedented times. We have a pandemic that's continuing into its second year. We have civil unrest and injustice, political uncertainty, polarized society, economic volatility. If you watched the Dow Jones today, you saw that happening. And we're in information overload. Depending on where you look and how you find your news, we're constantly bombarded by what information people want us to know. And I think you put all of this together, it creates an unsettled place for us to live as adults. And I think the most important thing we can recognize is that when we look at all of this, we're able to put it into a structure that we've been around. I've been around for 53 years. I have a lot of joys through my life that can help me get through some of these sadnesses and concerns. Our young people don't. They don't have that history. And so somehow we need to change the story for them. We need to give them our wisdom, our faith. We need to give them what we know to try to help them get through all of this, because they just don't have that history to rely on. So we take it one step further. Okay, so here's what we're dealing with as our own community. Let's look at teens. And it's ironic that all these things are P's, but they're P's, right? It's pressure, it's perfectionism, it's procrastination, it's panic, it's peers, it's parents, it's personal issues. You know, the pressure of finding a job, or the pressures of now what am I going to do, or how am I going to get into this college, or what's going to happen with this ACT or all of these concerns are constant. And then you throw on puberty, and that's just a cocktail of information and knowledge and chemicals, and it makes all of this hard. And then we add another P, right? A pandemic that none of us have had to navigate before. So there's no wonder when we look at what's going on with teen mental health that we see that teen girls are experiencing anxiety up to 36%. Teen boys are at a 19%. These are from parents who are looking at these existing problems. Depression is up 31% for girls and 18% for boys. Sleep issues, right? You see our kids are sleeping longer, or they're not getting up, or they're staying up later. Their whole rhythm of life is off, right? They're withdrawing from their families, and some of them are showing aggressive behavior. So there's no wonder that all those things are happening. But let's start with some key understandings. I truly believe that all kids are good. I think, and I hope you believe that too. That they're also trying to do the best that they can. They want to fit in, and they want to be accepted. They want to be liked and loved, which are different. They want to please other people. They want to make you happy. If you're parents, they absolutely want to please you. But they are stressed. They're scared about the future. They want to feel secure, and they want to be in control, but they don't have that right now. They want to feel good, and they want to be happy. But none of this feels good, and it's not a lot of happy. And on top of it all, they don't feel that anyone understands. Recently, we did a survey with our students at Padua, and the students came back, and they were just very clear that they wanted us to know that even though you think that you're going through this with us together, that it doesn't mean that they're not validated in the feelings they're having. And we can say, listen, we're here too, or we're dealing with this pandemic too, or it's hard on us too. That doesn't take away their emotions, their feelings. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is, what do we do with those emotions and those feelings? So the challenge for us tonight is what are we dealing with? What is this? So is it normal teenage angst? I think most of us would say no. It seems like it's teenage angst on steroids, and I don't mean that in a pun, but it's like that. Is it depression? Is it anxiety? Or is it even this new topic called COVID blues, right? Where there's stress, fear, there's grief of loss that's happening, there's uncertainty, and this constant fear of missing out. People know what FOMO is. The constant fear that we're not going to have a prom, we're not going to have a dance, we're not going to have what everybody else had. And so there's this constant anxiety and depression that's happening amidst all of this pandemic. Let's talk quickly about anxiety. I know the focus tonight is depression, but I want to talk a little bit about anxiety. So anxiety is this fear and apprehension that comes from being worried about what has happened in the past and what can happen in the future, right? It's worried and nervousness. But it coincides with thoughts about worry today and worry tomorrow, right? And when we have anxiety, the body-mind connection, the mind creates these thoughts that are very hard to stop, right? I think all of us know that. When you start worrying about something, it's hard to stop it, right? And eventually over time, that thought process starts to affect you physically. There's an emotional and an energy response in your body because it's trying to prepare you for what you're worried for. So there's an incredible substantial energy that happens through the body that starts rapid heart rate, sweating, shaking. You've seen people that are sitting there, their legs going a million miles an hour, right? The people who are dealing with some sort of worry or anxiety have all of this pent-up energy that has to be released. Sometimes when it gets serious, they get to a point of having a panic attack, right? So that's what anxiety is. And what's important to understand about that, it creates a lot of energy, and it worries about what happened in the past, and it may happen today, and it may happen tomorrow. What's different between that and depression? In depression, people believe their world is already bad, right? With little hope. So it's not future-oriented. It's focused very much on right now and how to stop what's happening right now. And on the opposite side of anxiety, depression, depressed emotions, decreases our energy. It takes it away. We lose interest. We lose our self-worth. We lose energy. We get exhausted, right? So that's the two main differences between anxiety and depression. Anxiety, though, can show up in depression. That's what makes all of this a little bit more complicated. But for the most part, when you're looking at whatever young person you're thinking about, is it a person who has more energy, they're more worried, they're more concerned about the future and tomorrow? Or are they already in a place that life is no good, it's already bad, and I have very little hope for the future? So then we have this thing called COVID blues, and again, I think most psychologists and psychiatrists are trying to figure all this out. And I looked to try to find as much research as I could, and I found some information from Dr. Powers James, and she said that if you're generally not feeling like yourself, that may be one of the first signs you're experiencing the blues. So you may find that you don't enjoy things as much as you used to. That overall feeling like I'm just not feeling like myself, it is not depression, right? That's what I want to make sure we understand. That there are common symptoms that come with dealing with a pandemic for so many months, years as it is. There are going to be feelings of sadness. It can be tearful. It can be empty and hopeless. There's feelings of restlessness, guilt, anger, right? These all all of these are signs of depression, but they're created because of the situation we're currently in. That's going to be a real important understanding as we move forward. We can identify that we're feeling this way because we're in a pandemic, that we have to wear a mask, that we can't go to the same events, that things have been canceled, right? I'm fully aware that there's less people in person, right? Things change, and it's causing people to see things in a different way and affecting us all. As adults and as students, especially as things continue to flow into what was hybrid learning to online learning and back to full go. Thank goodness most schools, 95%, are in school, because I think that's a huge piece of all of this. So then how do we differentiate between what is depression and what is COVID blues? Because as much as it's normal to feel this way because of COVID-19, and we're aware of it, if it starts to impact your daily life substantially, that's when we have to start looking towards depression, okay? And I will talk very specifically about this, but duration, severity, and real changes that are happening. Not just this mindfulness that it's COVID-19 and it's not fun and it's no good and I'm feeling not myself. So here's what I want you to look for as far as warning signs go for depression. So unexplainable changes, that's a real important word, unexplainable. So all of a sudden, friends are changing, grades are changing, behavior is changing, habits that they used to have, hobbies they used to have, activities and body appearance. When major substantial changes are happening in these areas, that's when we as people who care about children start to become worried. These are the warning signs, right? That you're seeing a substantial difference between what used to be and what is now in front of you. And it's easy to be unsure, okay? It's easy to, because this is one in five students who are depressed seek help, which is very interesting to me, because this is a very treatable concern. But for whatever reason, we have this fear of sending somebody to get help. So about 20% of our adolescents normally experience depression. Right now, we have about 30% of our adolescents experiencing some kind of depressed mood. But only 1 in 5 seek help. And tonight, you're going to hear me talk very clearly about finding somebody to help more. But it is hard. And the thing that we look through and for as far as diagnosis goes is that it has to be severe enough to cause substantial change. So dramatic, long-lasting changes, 2 to 3 weeks at a time, are what we're really looking for. And again, much more substantial than just a bad day off or on, okay? And I'm going to give you very clear rules on how to decipher depression. But I will tell you this, if a teenager can identify why they're feeling the way they're feeling, it's normally not clinical depression. Clinical depression is an experience that happens over time, and we don't necessarily know why it's happening. So if a person is sad because somebody passed away, you wouldn't necessarily call that depression, right? We would call that grief or bereavement, something of that nature. So if you can identify what's making them feel that way, then you can name it, claim it, and tame it. Pretty famous statements in the therapy world. If you can name what it is, then you can claim it, then you can tame it, right? Real depression will just not go away. It just doesn't go away. It's a very difficult loop to get out of on your own. Depression needs intervention, and depression is hard to understand. So if it's as simple as saying, well, I'm depressed because, then you can start to work that and undo that puzzle. But if it's, I don't know why I feel this way, or it keeps getting worse and I don't know why. I also want you to recognize that depression is anger turned inward. So this is an interesting and an important understanding. When a person has anger towards whatever's going on, and they can openly experience and express it, then it normally goes away. Little kids are great at this. They don't hide their anger, right? If they're mad, they go get a stick and hit something, you know. It gets rid of that anger right away. We as adults and young adults, we're taught to control ourselves. Like, don't act that way, don't be that way. And oftentimes that anger turns inward. And when that anger starts to turn inward, then we start to look at ourselves with anger. We don't like who we are. We don't like what we are. We don't like what's happening inside of us. And that anger tends to build. Major depression is a mood disorder. It can happen in episodes, and it can reoccur. It can happen once and go away, once it's worked through. It could be lifelong. The real major depression is both a thought process and physical. Most people who have major depression have very, very clear signs of stomach concerns, inability to sleep, restlessness, pains and aches, and a lot of different things going on with their body and their mind. But it's highly treatable. It's highly treatable because ourselves don't want to feel this way. We know we don't want to feel this way, but we do have to try to find somebody to help that and not just put it off as normal teenage angst, because you probably are not watching this if you're dealing with normal teenage angst, right? You're probably dealing with something harder. Major depression is a combination of symptoms. It interferes with our ability to do work, to study, to sleep, to eat, to enjoy pleasurable experiences. There's a difference between that and people who can function just fine in the workplace. They can continue to get good grades. They continue to be a part of the things that they enjoy. If those things are happening, if they're able to go to work and they're able to do their schoolwork and they're still enjoying things, then we're probably not dealing with major depression. We're probably dealing with certainly COVID blues or maybe even some dysmorphia or some things that are going on with how they feel about themselves. The DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which therapists use to diagnose people, clearly says that in order to have depression, you have to have these things. Okay, so it's not a puzzle for us to figure out if people are depressed. We know what we're looking for. Okay, so it has to be a same 2-week period. They have to have 5 of the symptoms I'm going to talk to you about, and one of them has to be the depressed mood or loss of interest and pleasure. Okay, so at least 2 weeks of significant impairment. So what does that mean? Significant impairment. They can't go to school. They quit the team. It's significant. It's not just the blahs. They are making actual decisions not to do things that they normally would do for 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks. If that's happening, then you very well might be dealing with major depression. Let's look at these 5 things. So depressed mood most of the day. So not just when they wake up, not just at night when they come home, it's all day long. They have a markedly diminished interest or pleasure in all or most activities. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to go out to dinner. They don't want to go with their friends. They don't want to go to the movies. They just don't. They have significant unintentional weight loss or gain. Oftentimes, the body responds to itself by either eating or not, right? Usually a sign that something is very wrong. Insomnia, so they can't sleep or they sleep too much. They're agitated or they have psychomotor retardation noticed by others. So they're either very agitated constantly or they're lethargic and they they're just, everything seems slower, right? Fatigue, loss of energy, feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt. Like they feel to blame themselves for this. The diminished ability to think or concentrate or indecisiveness. And certainly reoccurrent thoughts of death, okay? So they have to have 5 of these for 2 weeks. That's what we're looking for. Specifically, they have to have one of the first 2. And I'm not giving you this information for you to diagnose. Please know that. What I'm doing is trying to give you an understanding of what level something should get to that may need for you to respond, right? There's a whole bunch more to this. Teenagers tend to show different ways of some of these experiences. They can be irritable or angry mood. You've seen this where they have this huge anger outburst for something that doesn't seem like it should be like that. You know, you left your shoes on the floor and they just, right? It doesn't make sense. Unexplained aches and pains. They're not feeling well. Extreme sensitivity to criticism. Anytime you give them some criticism, they just take it as this is the worst thing you've ever told me. Withdrawing from some, but not all people. So, you know, there's going to still be people they want in their lives, but they start to back off from a lot of different people. Certainly problems at school are a red flag. That's always been the case. So, you know, all of a sudden they're frustrated, they're not doing well, they have poor attendance, they're having a hard time concentrating. Certainly if they run away, that's a cry for help. So if that's happening, please understand that. Substance abuse happens in teenagers. They're trying to quiet what makes them feel the way they are. They want to feel happy. There's a difference between being happy and feeling happy, right? But they do use alcohol and drugs, so they'll try to self-medicate the depression. We see that happening. And we see that happening with adults, right? Low self-esteem, they don't like themselves, they think they're ugly, they feel shame. And then eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, yo-yo, all of those kinds of things can be unrecognized depression. Most depression shows up in a dual diagnosis. When I was a clinical counselor right out of MA school at John Carroll, I did a whole work with students with drug and alcohol abuse. And every one of them had at least a dual diagnosis. Something else was behind what was happening, whether it was past experiences, depression, anxiety, something was going on with those kids. Internet addiction. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit. TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram, these things are not evil or bad, please know that. But that excessive, senseless computer use, constantly just browsing, is not healthy. It's not healthy. Falsified identities on social networks, if you find out that they have multiple accounts, that's not a good thing. They're doing that to hide something, so you should be aware of that. Self-injury, so cutting, burning, different kinds of self-mutilation are associated with depression. Certainly not everybody who has piercings and tattoos is depressed. I'm not saying that. But there becomes this obsession of that. That could be, in teenagers, a sign of them not feeling good about themselves. Reckless behavior, driving, out of control drinking, unsafe sex. Some of those things, if you're seeing some of that in your children, again, a very, very big concern and dangerous activities. Also illegal behaviors. So shoplifting and theft produces an incredible chemical high. It creates this I didn't get caught kind of feeling. So we're seeing that, even in our world, we're seeing an increase in that. Some students and kids become violent. So again, that anger turned inward can quickly turn outward, right? That release of all of that. And we've had people become certainly violent, especially victims of bullying. So those kinds of things can erupt. And then certainly suicide, which unfortunately has been in the news and is just such a horrific thing to happen. especially the young, to anybody. So suicidal warnings I want to stop here and look at this, because I think it's very, very important that we look at the one thing that we don't want to happen, which is suicide. So if your teen is talking or joking about committing suicide, saying things like, I'd better be off dead, I wish I could disappear forever, there's no way out of this, speaking positively about death, or romanticizing dying. If I died, people might love me more. You'll see what this would be like if I was gone. Writing stories or poems about death, dying, or suicide. Engaging in reckless behavior or having a lot of accidents resulting in injury might be a sign of suicidal ideation or suicidal attempts. Certainly giving away their prized possessions, saying goodbye to friends like they'll never see them again, and then seeking out weapons, pills, or other ways to kill themselves. These are very, very serious issues. They're very scary, and any serious illness is, we must respond to it. To me, and to everybody who's a therapist who works with kids, suicide's the game changer, right? So as soon as suicide shows up in a discussion, then the tough questions have to be asked. So you love your child, you care about your child, then you need to say, do you want to kill yourself? How will you do it? Do you have the means? Now, you don't have to ask those questions. But if you truly believe that suicide is in the game, and they're talking about those things, and they're bringing up these kinds of things, then before the sun goes down, that child needs an assessment. You need to call 911, or you need to call and take your child to the ER and say, I believe my child is suicidal. Certainly do not leave them alone. Okay? And the more that they answer the questions above, if they say, yes, I want to kill myself, and yes, I know how I'm going to do it, and yes, I know where those things are. So not only do they have a plan, but they have the means for that plan. Any concern about a stigma or what that's going to look like has to go away. You have to respond. We're all trained to respond in a school. We know what we have to do. But as adults, loving adults, this is one of the toughest things that you can do, and in my mind, one of the easiest. There's no decision to be made. So I want you to realize that normally, again, depression affects 20% of our teens. Twice as many girls as boys. Interesting. But numbers are even higher now. They're plus 30% is what we're hearing. And like I said, experts only say 1 in 5. I think we can change that. I think loving people who are connected to students can absolutely change that, because it's a very treatable illness. So we already talked about all these things, when to act, right? When things are persistent, when they continue to get worse, when they continue to create problems physically and mentally, you have to respond. But what if it's not depression? Then what? What do you do when it's not depression? Because if it's 20% of students, or 20% of our children, then some of the 80 that are dealing with this, what do? There's a whole bunch of things it could be, right? It could be depression, but it could be persistent depressive disorder, dysthemia. It could be seasonal affective disorder. It's winter in Cleveland, and plenty of people feel the doldrums, right? They could be worriers. They could be general anxiety disorder, grief, bereavement, sadness, unhappiness. They could be stressed out. It could be the blahs. A lot of times it's stress. And a lot of people don't necessarily recognize what stress is. We all have stress, right? But it's a psychological response to a physiological response to a psychological or physical stimuli. Ultimately, it's a thought that creates energy in our body. That's what stress is. Without stress, we wouldn't breathe, right? You need that, keep breathing, right? But there's a difference between eustress, which is the good stress that makes us do everything every day, and distress, which starts to destroy us, which eats us up. It's a negative amount of energy. When dealing with teenagers, puppies must be walked, right? I mean, you have to walk puppies because they have a lot of energy. I like to use this analogy of the bucket. Inside of us, there's a bucket that holds energy. Everything that happens fills the bucket, right? So when you sit there and you think about a teenager who goes through their normal day, right? They already have energy because they're sort of puppies, right? They have this energy. But then they get yelled at going to school, and then they have a test, right? And then they have an assignment, and then their friend says something mean to them, and then they forgot lunch money, and all this energy goes into the bucket. Like everything that happens creates an energy. The problem becomes when we don't do anything to get rid of the energy, right? So we either have to empty the bucket on a regular basis or get a bigger bucket, which is hard to do. We have bigger buckets. I say that in a nice way. We have bigger buckets because we've been around longer, right? Our buckets, we understand what's really hard and what's not, right? We've gone through difficult things, right? And the loss of people in our lives, that expands our bucket to what we can experience in our lives. Kids have little buckets. They haven't had that much experience with horrificness, and some have, unfortunately. But most have these like medium-sized buckets. So what do you do about it? So I think there's really three reasons that teenagers are unhappy. There's three major reasons, beyond depression and all these other things. Number one, people either set too high or too low of a goal. So you either set this goal like you have to be this top-notch doctor, nurse, lawyer, whatever, and be so successful that it's hard to get to this point. You almost feel like you're always losing. And then there's kids who have no goals. I just want to get up this morning. Now, for some people, that's an incredible goal. I'm not saying it isn't. But for most people, it's not. Like, get out of bed, right? And if they're not, then we got to go back to those signs. Is that somebody dealing with depression? But if you set too low of goals, then you have no pride. Remember all the hard work that we did as young people, as growing up? You had to earn what was important to you, not given everything that's important to you. You have to learn that it takes hard work to develop life and develop things. So we want to give our students and our children goals that are realistic, right? But that are challenging. So it's okay to talk to them. What is your goal? Oh, I want to be, here. Okay. What happens if you don't? Or, I don't know what I want to do. We have to have good, strong goals, high achieving goals, but that are not so low that they don't bring any joy. The missing or broken tile syndrome is something I talk about. It's like the one light out on the Christmas tree and all the lights go out. But you only have one broken light bulb, right? So you got to find the light bulb. Most people just throw the thing away. Most of the time, when teenagers going through their life, if this walkway here of tiles was the example of what is in life, and there were a couple cracked ones, which would kill my brother if that happened, but we wouldn't say that this whole walkway is horrible, right? We would cut out that one and cut out that one and fix it. But too often, we judge our whole lives based on a couple things that aren't in right place. And with good discussion, with loving adults and parents, we can identify what those are. Instead of them going, my whole life sucks. We can help them identify what these are. Bring hope. Bring the understanding that we can fix this. But when one light goes out, they all go out. And the last thing I truly believe is such a struggle for teenagers is they compare themselves to others. And at no time in life has this been worse than it is right now. It's you take the best of every person you know and you look at yourself next to this uber person that doesn't exist. How can you feel good at all, right? You take the best of your friends, their best, their car, their house, their eyes, that girl's hair, whatever, and you create this image that doesn't exist. No more is that true than on Instagram and Pinterest and Facebook, where we create these perfect worlds that we let everybody see. This is my life. Perfect, right? And everybody looks at it and goes, how can I be happy in this world? I'll never be that. There was a Photoshopper who merged the best of the Catherine Zeta-Jones, this is getting old, Charlize Theron, Angelina Jolie, and Keira Knightley. And that's what it ended up looking like. The best eyes, the best lips, the best nose, the best hair. Looks a little like Michael Jackson, I think, a little bit, doesn't it? It's a little odd. But that's not what we want to be either. We don't want to be that. We want to be what God created us to be. Remember, all kids are good, and all kids are trying to do the best they can, but they're stressed. They're scared about their future. They don't feel they're in control. They want to feel good and they want to be happy, but they don't think anybody understands. So what do? Well, they try to do all these other things that sort of take away the pain, the frustration, the depression, drinking and drugs, cutting, sex, bad relationships, stealing, lying, changes of behavior, acting out, anger, and escaping through the internet and video games. Like, that's what they do. They keep throwing these darts trying to figure out what will make them happy, right? Because these are there. And I've seen teenagers in my years of doing this. They just keep moving. Like, once this one doesn't work, they go to the next one. They keep trying to find the solution in this negative board. And it's not a good place to live. And as a matter of fact, it makes it all worse. Because stress is a physical thing. And all of these things hurt us physically. So you actually end up creating more difficulty in your body. I'll talk a little bit about teens and social media. It's an interesting thing that's happening right now. There's actual researchers, Jenna Glover's one, who is seeing that social media actually helped teenagers through this COVID world. It helped, especially if they were doing good things, like creating YouTube videos and connecting to their friends and doing those kinds of things. They were actually being engaging and helping them get through these things. And as long as they were doing good stuff, it was helpful. But this passive scrolling of TikTok and viewing YouTube, it's toxic to mental health. So there's a balance that has to happen. And no time, it's up like 40% the usage of teenage and social media. It's the what that matters, right? It's the what that matters. So, if they're it's like junk food. Like, you're just putting it in and it's not doing any good for you. Bad things are on the internet, and I think we need to know that. And when students are isolated in their rooms for hours and hours on end, yes, they need their private space. I want you to know that. Like, teenagers need privacy. But we also need to know what they're doing, because there's bad things, and we have to be aware, and we have to monitor our children. But again, use is up as much as 63% since pre-pandemic. I think some of it's schooling. Here's some of the things that have been good versus bad. So I talked about the constructive part. Here's the destructive. It takes them away from sleep, physical activity, schoolwork, attention, face-to-face interaction, and healthy brain development. We know all of these things are research-based. We have students who are sleeping with their phones in their hands, and it's constantly going off all night long. And then their fear of missing out, and so they wake up, and then there's no REM sleep, and it's a chemical loop that's creating them to feel horrible. They feel sick, they feel bad because they're just not getting enough rest. I'll come back to this. It also is providing them with a lot of things that are not okay. Oversharing, people who are not good, who have access to the kids, being bullied. There's so many things that are happening that, and unfortunately, I think there are a lot of parents that don't know what's going on their machines and their kids' devices. And I fear that that's not good. I know it's not good. So there has to be, so what do we do? Okay, so there's the problem. What do we do? So you need to provide your children with limits. I think it's important to know that. They want you to help them. You know how hard it is to put down your phone? What do you think it is for a kid? People go on vacation, they can't put down their phones. This is just a report that just came out. Teenagers want you to help them not always look at their phone. Believe it, they won't like you for it, but they'll love you for it. You have to provide guidance and support in decision making, right? Whatever you want to do, I'll support you. That's a ridiculous statement. That's not an okay statement. You need to work with your teenagers to make good decisions. You need to help them see the good and the bad. You need to look with them from above the whole picture and look at the puzzle. Very few of them are looking at it from all angles. You need to provide them with discipline and routine. You cannot function well if you're sleeping till noon. You just can't. You're out of a routine that is a normal, joyful experience. There's third shift people, I get that. I'm talking about teenagers, right? And I know some of them need rest, and I know some of them are catching up on the weekends because they're up all week doing homework. I get that. But there has to be a routine. And routines bring people to a better place. Being aware of what's happening in their lives daily, talking to them, even though they're going to be minimalists with you, it'll be like, how'd you do today? Fine. What did you do? Nothing. Keep asking the question, right? They want you to ask. They want you to be a part of their lives. Seek advice and help when needed, right? Seek advice and help when needed. If you believe that your teenager is dealing with depression, you need to seek advice and find help. That's what you must do. You are not going to do this on your own, right? You're just not. You need somebody who's a mental health professional who can help sort through this because, quite frankly, you're too close to it. You're too close to it. And give them positive coping skills. So let's change the dartboard, right? Get them back to a basic of life where they're doing the things that they've always been told to do, always were trained to do, always were expected to do, right? There's 5 parts of a human being. It's called SPIES: social, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. I'll say them again. Social, physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, SPIES. All 5 of those have to be being worked on. It's a balance. And if any one of these areas is being pulled apart, you're going to find that your child's going to have difficulty. If they're not creating good social relationships, spending time with friends and being with family, that's going to be a problem. If they're not sharing their emotions on a regular basis, not talking about how they feel, talk to them about how they feel about COVID. Talk to them about their school. What are you afraid of? What is your fear, right? If they're not intellectually working on things and making themselves better, they're not keeping themselves in balance. Even if it's just doing crossword puzzles and stuff. It's important to keep your mind active. And physically, we know that physically is the number one thing. Eating well, staying hydrated, exercising, sleeping well, avoiding things that are bad for you. Those are the kinds of things that make depression worse. And it's the things that dump the bucket. So I tell you about dumping the bucket. If the bucket is filled with energy, then what dumps the bucket? Anything that releases energy. A good cry releases energy. Watching a funny movie releases energy. Do you ever have a barrel laugh that it hurts? They need that in their lives. I watch the same movies all the time because they make me laugh, right? And sometimes I find myself 3-4 days, I go, I don't think I've laughed in 3-4 days. Yeah, and I'm a funny guy. But we get out of this routine, we forget about those things, right? So we have to do things to take care of ourselves. Riding a bike, exercising, walk the dog, play with the dog, if you don't like cats or whatever. Do something that releases the energy every day. Prayer, meditation, playing, relaxing, talking. try this with your teenagers. Whatever they're telling your body to do the opposite. So if they want to stay up late, tell them to go to bed. If they want to sleep late, tell them to wake up, right? If they want to eat a bag of chips, tell them to have broccoli. Like, your body is trying to work through all of this, but it's most of the time, if you do the opposite, it can bring a balance, right? And then absolutely, and I'm telling you this is a game changer from a faith community point of view, that the development of faith can get us through all of this because our God is powerful. So your prayers for your children are essential. Pray fervently for your kids and help them to develop a spirituality that talks about changing sorrow to joy, right? And it's hard because teenagers run from religion. Try to start slowly with just bringing up the idea that there is a hope here, there is a faith here, there is a God who loves us. Talk to your teen. Ask your school for guidance. We have whole programs at school to help our students. Every school does. Visit your family doctor, right? Pediatrician, I don't know. There's something going on with Johnny, I don't know. Because sometimes it could be medical, right? We want to make sure it's not medical, and sometimes these things can happen. On the back of your insurance card, there's a phone number. Call them. I'm looking for somebody who can talk to my child. Seek out a specialist, explore the treatment options. There's so many different ways of dealing with this, right? Certainly talk therapy, it's not about just going right into medication, okay? There's certainly dopamine and serotonin and all those things that are happening. I'm not going to get into those things, but it does become a pretty aggressive loop in a human being once they've used up their serotonin and their dopamine, right? So sometimes medication is necessary. Offer support. Be gentle but persistent. Yelling at a child who's depressed will never fix it. It's not going to help. They hear you. They hear you. They don't know what to do. Listen without lecturing. Just listen, right? Validate their feelings. And they are taking clues from you. So if you look miserable, you look scared, you look worried, you're the steward and stewardesses on this boat or this plane. They're looking to you to feel calm, right? They want you to be the ones that say, it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay, right? Their peer group is important too. And again, when we say, pick your own friends, friendships make all the difference. And you are one of their friends. And I want you to be their parent, but they look to you for love, right? And you are so important in their lives, even if they treat you like you're not. You are so important in their lives. So don't give up on the idea that you make a difference, because you do. Some final thoughts. Step back and put the puzzle together. Like, really step back and go, what are we seeing here? Are things drastically different, or is it just this, are we in this place? Learn to be aware. And again, once you start seeing these symptoms, talk about it. Listen, I notice you really seem very, very sad lately. You don't seem yourself lately. Engage them in discussion. Seek help. Don't wait till this gets horrible. You don't have to. There's plenty of people who will talk with your children. Priests, too. He asked me to do the talk. I can put him. If you suspect that a teenager in your life is suffering depression, speak up right away and do something. This is the phone number to the Cuyahoga County Community Mental Health Board. They can help you, especially if somebody's thinking of suicide. There's also a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. Or you can text home to 741-741 if you have somebody in your life who needs help. There's incredible resources, like I said, information overload, right? But there's incredible information. If you go to the National Institute of Mental Health, there's just topic pages and topic pages about how to deal with COVID in your teen, how to help them guide decisions, how to get through this and look for what's the next steps. I mean, it's just incredible resource for us. That's the end. Do you have any questions? That was a lot of information. I suppose if I want to come through all of this is that if you have a real concern because you love your children more than anybody, if there's a real concern, then seek out somebody who can help guide you to make a decision, right? If you can't figure it out for yourself, then let somebody help guide you, right? And you'll sleep better. You'll know that you're doing something. And oftentimes it's that kind of courage and hope that makes all the difference. Because like I said, it's very treatable, and people don't want to feel this way. And I know, in dealing with teenagers for, again, 30 years, that they're incredibly wonderful people who are doing the best they can. And they need our help, more than ever, more than ever. This is unprecedented for us, but imagine what it is for them. So thank you. Have a good night. God bless.